There we go. Now, so what we're going to do today, we're going to hook up Salesforce to a messaging service called Slack. Who's heard of Slack? That's good. Who uses Slack actively? Excellent, cool. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. I'm one of the enterprise architects at Salesforce. I work out of the office in London. You can probably tell that that's not my hometown. I started my life at Salesforce in Sydney for a couple of years and came out to London at the start of last year. And was quite lucky enough that they flew me out here to talk to you guys here at the first ever developer conference, which is super cool. Here's our forward-looking statement slide that they make us show you whenever we do that. Don't make any purchasing decisions on product or stock based on any future-looking statements I might make today. Okay, cool. Has everyone seen something like this link about, this is where the workshop content's going to be today, so I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to leave that up while everyone goes and hit that link. It should just take you to my GitHub repository. There's a README in there that you can walk through, and it's got hyperlinks and all sorts of good stuff in it, and we'll show you about that as well. Let me know if you can't get to that for some reason, I don't know why, your internet's not working, or I move on and advance the slide or something and you haven't got it. So if you've got people that want to do this that didn't make it in today as well, guys, I know we had to turn a few people away from the door. We're running this same session at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if you just think that my presentation's so amazing you have to come back and see it again, please feel free to come back and see it tomorrow morning as well, or let your colleagues know that we're there. Has everyone got this? Anyone not got this? Can I move on? Okay, one of the things you'll find out about me is I do wait for feedback. So questions require answers. Can I move on? Hey, there we go. Thanks, guys. All right. So let's talk about what we're doing today. We're going to do three exercises today, just to prove that integration and we can works in both ways. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to update a Slack channel from within Salesforce when something happens in Salesforce. So for us, that event is going to be, we're going to update an opportunity and have that opportunity sort of propagate a message into Slack. Okay, kind of a neat little use case there. It demonstrates actually one of the really nice things. I'm fairly new to Slack. I'd never really played with webhooks before I started playing with this. It's really super cool. Then we're going to use slash commands to pull back some data from Salesforce, and we're going to talk about how we do that. And then the last thing we're going to do today is put in a bot inside Slack that we can talk and get the bot to go and query Salesforce for us as well. So we've got, I think, an hour and a half together this afternoon before we all sort of go home and get our dancing shoes on for Lenny Kravitz, which is kind of cool as well. So I'm going to the way I like to run these, we're going to work through the first bit. I'm going to show you a demonstration of what it should look like when it's working. We'll put the exercise up. You should have it as well. And then we can just walk around. And if anyone gets stuck or asks questions, I'll keep an eye on the time. And then we'll move on from that. Sound good? Yes, thank you. We've got one person that's still with me on that. That's usually all it takes is just one person. Okay. A couple of prerequisites today. So apart from the workshop content, we're going to want the Slack account. Has everyone got a Slack account? Can I make a recommendation here? Don't publish this into your production version of Slack, okay? This is something that's just playing around. Maybe go and create a new Slack team that's a demo for you, because you can clean up Slack teams as well. So all the rest of the people in your company don't get you bragging about how you're doing really cool Slack integrations at the Salesforce Developer Conference. If you haven't got a Salesforce developer account, can I suggest you go and get one of those as well? I'm kind of expecting everyone in the room has got a developer account by now. And the last thing that you're going to need is a Heroku account. Does everyone know what Heroku is? Again, one of those questions that requires a response, yeah. So a couple of the things we've done here is we're going to proxy conversation between Salesforce and Slack through a Node.js application on Heroku. Don't worry, you don't have to write that. We've got that there to deploy and show you about that. But if you don't have a Heroku account, you'll need to go and sign up for one. Go and get the free tier. It's a pretty cool service as well. Okay, who doesn't have all these three? I tricked you then. See, I said who doesn't have? So do we need to wait a moment to let people sign up? Yeah, we'll wait a moment there as well to jump in and have a quick look and sign up for Heroku as well. It's kind of cool. Okay. So you should all at least have those links as well and get ready to sort of get started there. I'm going to plug my phone in here, so who knows what's going to happen. I do need some charge. Excellent. Okay. So let's start with the first part of the workshop today, and we'll start to talk a little bit about what it is. I'll give you a quick demo, and then we can sort of jump into the actual content. This is pretty much what we're doing. So it's the moving pieces, if you were, of what we're about to build. Really, really simple. We're going to use an Apex class. So we're going to put some Apex code in there that when an opportunity is updated, it's going to post out to Slack, and Slack's going to handle that broadcast notification because that's what Slack does quite well. The mechanism that we're going to call to initiate this call, we're going to use with the process builder. Okay, so we're going to investigate a few things about how we do that kind of stuff in Salesforce. So we're going to set up a Slack channel, and we're going to configure this thing called a webhook in Slack, and it'll give us a nice RESTful API to call out from, post things inside Slack, which is kind of cool. Here's an example of a screen. When you come in and look at your Slack, if you've never done this before, just the gear up inside Slack here, pop down and add an app or an integration is what we're going to do. So we go, this add an app or integration step, guys, is in every one of the things we do today. So it's just at the gear at the top of your Slack channel, and I'll show you that again before we finish today. I wanted to take a little moment and talk about this idea of what an action is in Salesforce. Over the last probably 18 months, I guess, at Salesforce, we've been working on this thing called an actions framework. Now, you might have heard us a little while ago talk about this thing called a chatter action. I think that's what we called these things when we first released them. We sort of now just talk about an action framework. But in chatter, you've got a bunch of different actions that are available to you today, something we call standard actions. This idea, I want to post something, I want to put a file, I want to ask a question. Okay, all that stuff you've seen in chatter, this is just part of the action framework. Then we've got these other kind of things like non-standard actions, and we're going to do some custom actions today. And the custom action we're going to build is what we write in Apex code. The action framework, guys, is really useful because not only does now we can expose that inside the process builder, for example, it will actually also show up inside our workflow tool, and it'll also show up on the Actions API, which is really nice from a developer's perspective because now I just write one piece of code and one Apex test, if I'm doing it properly. And now it's exposed in a number of different ways. So however users want to get there, we can do that. And you can see some examples of where you'd see these in the UI. Okay, these turn up here in the classic UI or over here inside the new Lightning experience as well. So some really neat functions happen here around the Actions UI. If this is new, if you're not familiar with actions in Salesforce, I can encourage you to just jump into the developer documentation and have a quick read about when and where you'd use you'd use actions because they're really useful. Here's a little bit of code. It's just a sample of some of the code we're going to write today. Well, let's be honest, we're going to copy and paste today. It's this invocable variable annotation is really important, and this invocable method annotation is really important here as well. These are the things that we put on our Apex class to tell Salesforce that we want to make sure this is available to the actions framework. And there's the code. The code's in the work stuff as well. And the last thing we're going to do, obviously, is in the process builder. So one of the things that I absolutely love that the product people did when they built this is gave us the ability to call Apex code. I love that because I work for the sales team. And when someone says, can I do this in the process builder? My answer is always yes. Because worst case scenario, you can write some Apex and do it. So that's kind of cool. But you'll see here, and again, if you've never seen Process Builder, guys, I encourage you, well, you'll see it today. Select the object, select a criteria. When is something going to happen on this? When that criteria is true, fall through to an action. And we're going to set up a single action today on this. We're going to just post to Slack. But you can set multiple actions here as well, which is kind of cool. So you could post to Slack, post to Chatter, update a record, do some stuff, all on the same on the output of this same criteria. Who wants to have a look? We'll have a quick demo, and then we'll let you guys into it for 20 minutes. See how I let you get away with that question without an answer. Cool. So here I am in Salesforce. Kind of nice. And there I'm not in Salesforce because I tend to have split monitors. Bear with me just 1 second while I mirror my displays. Arrangement. So here we are in Salesforce. You can see I've just opened an opportunity here. Again, if you've not super familiar with the Lightning experience, coming into here, let's open up Express Logistics, for example. Here's an opportunity. And I might come into my details. And somewhere down here is my stage. When I update my stage, that happens. Here is my Slack channel, guys. Down the bottom here, you can see now I've had my general Slack channel. Down the bottom, I've got my notification has been posted out to me on Slack. Okay? It says the following opportunity, Express Logistics Portable Truck Generators, has changed. It's now got a new stage. Okay? That's what we're about to build. Any questions? Is everyone ready to go? Yes. Who said no? Excellent. What are we missing? It being the workshop? When you Oh, it looks like we've got a distributed denial of service attack on Slack at the moment. I really don't have an answer for you there. Okay, that's cool. Oh, we're in a concrete bunker as well, aren't we? Yeah. Oh, well. It was a great demo though, right? Okay. Who's through? Did anyone manage to get through to Slack? Okay, so we got a few. Well, that's not a total loss, I guess. I'm going to talk to the Slack people upstairs after this. Okay, so let's, what are we going to do? Okay, for those that are working through it and you have your Slack connection, happily work away and continue. I think if you can't get a hook on Slack, keep trying. And as while we do that, we might walk through some of the things that we're going to do, and I might sort of turn this into a bit more of a walking through demo. So, and again, kind of apologies for the network security, but that's what happens when you run a cloud service, I guess. So the first thing we wanted to do is come in and create this idea of a Slack channel. So if you've never seen Slack or you're fairly new to Slack before, you've probably familiar with an IRC if you're my age. This is how I started using the internet, as just as a thing to chat to my friends. And this is a thing that I can chat to the teams that I work with inside Salesforce. So I've come up and I've created a different team. So I've got a Salesforce Slack demo over there. And I can create Slack teams up through my user interface here, up here somewhere. Team settings, apps and integration, customize, all these different things here. This idea of signing into other teams is where I would do that. When I wanted to add integrations in here, so the first thing we wanted to do is come through and talk about, we've created a Slack team and a channel, and we want to start to create the integration itself. So when I come up here and I hit this little gear that I told them, actually, can you guys up the back, can you see that? Should I make that bigger? Yep, sorry, I'm standing closer to it than you are. How's that, a little better? Yeah, sorry about that. So if I jump in here now, I can start to add this integration. So we want to come in and add a Slack integration here as well. It takes me to this nice, simple spot inside Slack, and where I say I want to look at a webhook. Now you'll see I've already installed one here, so I've got my Slack demo and I can configure it, but you'll have a button that says install, and you can start to install webhooks. When you add configurations, you start to set out how you're going to connect to Slack. This idea of this webhook URL, this is the thing that we're going to put inside our Apex class. Okay, so this is the endpoint we want to use to get to for Slack. Now you can do this as a JSON string in a post or as the body of a post. This curl command that they're talking about is really useful as well. Just if you've never used curl, just a command line to test that your webhook works. It works kind of fine. Yeah? Yeah, shoot. You don't see a webhook integration on Slack? Yep, so come up here. Are you in your company's Slack?
No, my personal. Do I need to be on company?
Nope. That's interesting. That's what's fun about these things. I can't use computers. There you go. You're in the force. You're in a bot. Yep. Yeah, so this webhook URL is kind of important, so you want to copy that. You'll keep, and then you can test it, and you'll see that these curl commands are testable as well. You can do all sorts of things. You can add links. You can customize the appearance. You can put your company's logo and stuff like that in there. All sorts of neat stuff. And if you see on my Slack channel, I've done none of that. And I'm just using the standard icon that they've given me here and said this thing's happened here. That configuration, to be honest, this is one of the things that quite impressed me about Slack when I started with this a week or two ago. That was actually really simple to do. It was quite easy. It was quite friendly piece of work to do. Then I started to play around with this stuff in Salesforce. And where are we? Let me make that bigger again, because that'll help everyone see it. If I come over to setup, the first thing we've got over in Salesforce is this ability to create a class. So here's the Apex code that we're starting to create. So if you can take this code, you can copy it. This is that webhook URL that I was talking about. So you want to take that integration from Slack and drop it inside that particular parameter up here. And then you can start to see we've done things like, we talk about this invocable variable and this invocable method. And when we talk about the constructor here, I'm actually asking for two variables, the name and the stage. And you'll see in the process builder where those things are exposed as well. So this is how we tell our users these are the things that we'd like you to populate with. And then we talk about, here's the method. We're going to post to Slack. And it calls out and includes this job, this queuable Slack call. Again, if you're sort of new to calling out from Salesforce in Apex, this is one of those things I'd encourage you to go and sort of play with as well. There's two things that happen when you call out from Salesforce. You can sort of do it in a transaction and call out and wait for something to return and hold that back. It's not great to do that if you don't need to. Now there's a use case where you might need to do that kind of thing. You might want to call onto a pricing service, right? You're going to have to wait for the answer to come back for you for that kind of thing and continue your calculations. But in this case, we don't have to. In this case, all we want to do is send a message out, and we don't want to hold the user up from waiting for anything to respond. So we're going to use this queuable interface, and we're going to use this allows callouts interface, and that's basically going to put it on a queue and make this asynchronous. Okay, so we're going to call it, and we're going to execute that job, and it'll happen, and it won't hold up the transaction for us. Really useful stuff to make your user experience a little better like that. The interesting thing to remember if you're following the bouncing ball here, by the way, is this idea of security in Salesforce. The first time I set this up, it didn't work because I didn't have a remote site in Salesforce enabled for it. Okay, so if you've not seen this before, somewhere in my setup, I've got this thing under security called remote site settings. And what you can do in Salesforce is you need to tell the back end, you need to tell Salesforce that these are the services I'm going to consume. I want to call out to these services, and we need to make them nice and secure. And you can see here this hooks.slack.com. You might not see that if you're up the back. You might have to take my word for it. That remote site has been enabled here, so when we call out to Slack, that's going to work for us. The last piece of our puzzle we've come in and just created a process through the process builder. So if you're familiar with workflow, everyone's written a workflow here for Salesforce? Yeah, a few people? Yeah, I do this for the whole session, by the way. It's not just the start. I'm always going to wait for an answer. This is kind of like the new version of workflow. It doesn't replace it completely. It definitely complements it. And as I'm sure you'll agree, I think the user experience is a much nicer user experience than workflow. And you can see what we've done here. I've selected my object. Choose what happens when something starts. Okay, so when the opportunity is updated or created. Okay, so those same constraints around when this fires is there. Set some criteria. These state change things are quite nice. They're on the operators. We've got things like is changed and stuff now, which makes these things quite nice to use. So all we're saying here is when the stage name is updated, okay, when it's changed from one value to another, do something. And we've got an action here that is my Apex action that says broadcast via Slack. And you did? Didn't? Excellent. Does everyone want to have a crack at Slack again? Thanks. I knew there was a good reason to have them at the conference. How did we go? Same problem. You're getting that same. That's okay. It's an interesting error message. And you're getting the same helpful error message for some weird reason. And maybe that might take longer to propagate through the network as well. That's all we can do. So when I add this Apex class in here, remember those two variables that I pointed out that were annotated? This is where they show up here. So if we put more variables in here, and then we can just reference different things. So it's a pretty simple thing that we're doing here. All we're doing is we're saying take this code, execute it, pass these values to it, and that Apex class is then calling out onto that webhook URL that we created in Slack and posting to Slack. Who's working on that? Okay. So the question, guys, was, is there any authentication? And it's an excellent question to ask. So yeah, one of the things about Slack, to get an authenticated channel, you need to pay for it. This is a free channel, so there's no authentication on this. Okay, we just post directly to it. But yeah, it uses OAuth and stuff as well. If you're putting into an enterprise version of Slack, yeah, you need authentication on this. Is a really good point to make. Everything we've done here is not really authenticated that well. How do you implement the authentication? Yeah, so it would be, I'd go and read the documentation. On Slack, they use OAuth, so they probably use a web server flow, I imagine. I could be wrong on OAuth. So if you've not seen, if you're new to OAuth as well, OAuth is a standards-based way of trading identity between different blocks of code. Okay? The best way to explain it, the best way I've ever heard OAuth explained was, you know how when you buy a new car, you get a valet key? Okay? So you get the key that you can give to the valet, and if you've got a valet key, the car doesn't drive faster than 5 miles an hour, it won't open the glove box. That valet key is a limited credential for your car. It's not your system admin key that allows you to drive the car at 100 miles an hour, but it does operate some function in your car. An OAuth token is very similar. So when you go and authenticate via OAuth, you go in and the identity provider, it could be Slack, it could be Salesforce, it could be anything, comes and says, well, I recognize these credentials, but it's being proxied through a layer of code. Right? There's a difference between you typing your username and password into the Salesforce login screen, between you typing your username and password into a login screen that I've built and have told you I'm going to use Salesforce to get to. So you can say, well, here's a piece of code that we've written. We don't trust the code as much as we trust our code, so we're going to give it a limited set of credentials. And in the second part of this, we'll show you how you set that up in Salesforce, how you set OAuth up as a connected app. Does that answer the question? Has anyone finished that? Excellent. Excellent. Well done. Here's cheers to you. I should have bought Minties or chocolates or something. I don't know. Everyone gets a prize. Well, not really. Okay. So let's all assume that Slack hasn't been blocking us. Awesome. So the next thing we want to do is start to talk about slash commands. And so slash commands are an interesting little feature of Slack that allow me to shorthand execute things inside their platform. Okay, and so what we're going to do here today is, we're going to try to do, is leverage slash commands to query Salesforce. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to ask for a pipeline report. We're going to create a case. We're going to create a contact, those kind of things. And the way we set up a slash command, we need this piece in the middle now. We need something to proxy between Slack and Salesforce. And we've introduced a piece of Heroku. We've got a Node.js application that sits in between these two things. And what's going to happen here is the user's going to type a slash command. That's then going to be posted out to our endpoint on Heroku. Heroku's going to handle the authentication for us, amongst other things, back to Salesforce. Okay? And it's going to call Salesforce and then return the results back to us.
Is there a reason why you can't call directly to Salesforce?
The reason we set this up like this is, again, because we needed to handle the authentication mechanisms and stuff into Salesforce here, which this Slack thing is the free version as well. So we wanted to make it nice and simple. As far as I know, that's the case. I'd have to investigate that further. Like I said, I'm fairly new to Slack as well. I know that they have in their platform the ability to make modifications and to run sort of platform stuff. Where that gets to, it's anybody's business. I'm not sure. We'll talk a little bit about how that works. And once you set up the Heroku app and you start to look at some of these configuration variables, these IDs, like the client ID and the client secret stuff, these are the OAuth tokens that set up a trust relationship. I'm not entirely sure you can do that. And someone takes down my password and my security token. If you're on this second one, guys, and you have managed to get that elusive Slack connection, when you configure this, remember you need your security token on your password here as well. Okay, this caught a bunch of people out that were testing this for me. Again, if this is a new concept to you, I'll show you where to get that from in your Salesforce use. But Salesforce has this concept of a user has a password and can have a security token. And when we're accessing things via the API, we typically like the security token as well to give us that just a little bit extra security on that. We're also then going to set up slash commands, and this is going to work in the same way that we would have set up our webhook. Okay, we're going to go and add our app. We're going to look at our slash commands, and we're going to set up 3 different slash commands this time. When you're setting up the configuration of your slash commands, guys, there's this URL. You're all going to get a different app URL from Heroku. Okay, you're going to get your own app URL, so you're going to have to make sure you copy that in the right spot. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. So if I come down and have a look at what we've just sort of put together, or what we're trying to put together in this second part of the shoot, here's my channel. I want to be able to just execute commands in here. So I don't really want to leave Slack, but I'm curious about what the pipeline is. So I don't want to go to Salesforce. So I can come in and look at some of the slash commands that exist in here. These are all the ones. And then if I can type properly, I can look for some pipeline. And it's gone. My Heroku app has timed out. So let's start it out again. It's a fun thing about the free version of Heroku. We sort of spin down dynos in Heroku, and then they need to wake up. So that one just spun down. But you can see now that I've called out onto the pipeline report, and it's retrieved some data for me from Salesforce. Okay, and that's taken those hops through Heroku to do this for me. And Heroku's also put some UI stuff on there. The app in Heroku that's doing, if anyone's interested, when we go and look at the code, we don't have the code. Where's my button? You can deploy the app in Heroku. So has anyone used the Heroku button before? Okay, cool. This is one of the niftiest features of Heroku that I love this thing. So Heroku as a platform as a service, okay? It allows you to deploy compiled code into a container that will execute that container for you. And it's fully elastic, okay? You can turn it on, you can scale it up, you can scale it down. It's a really neat platform for running applications that have variable demand loads. We talk to customers about using Heroku at Salesforce that get to massive scale, like really big B2C, millions and millions and millions of users kind of scale. It's got some really neat features around data services as well. Some of those things, like it's, an absolute awesome Postgres service. We've got a fully supported Redis data store in there. We've just started to launch the Kafka service as well, which is super cool. And all these services and things and all the add-ons that come with Heroku come with that whole idea is you don't have to manage your stack. Okay? Who's any AWS users? right? You know how, so this runs on Amazon. Okay, Heroku runs on AWS infrastructure around the world. And when you start your Heroku applications, you can usually choose where you want it to run. You can run it over here in the States. You can run it in Ireland. You can take some of the private spaces or some of the features around Heroku Enterprise and run it in Frankfurt and over in Tokyo, I think, as well. There's a bunch of different places you can run it. But it basically abstracts all that complexity of managing AWS servers away from you. Okay, so you don't have to worry about setting up your VPCs or all your routers or all your, all that sort of proxy stuff that you set up in Amazon to configure those things. All you now have to do is say, here is my unit of code, here is my project, deploy that to Heroku. And it is absolutely completely automated. And this Heroku button is a really good indication of just how automated that is. I can put a piece of code on a web page that you can click and deploy that straight away. So if you've signed up for Heroku, or if you have a Heroku account, come onto your tutorial and click the link, and it will just download that code into Heroku, deploy it into a dyno for you, and spin that up and execute it, and you'll have a production system up and running at the click of a button. It's a really, really neat platform. The application that it spun up for me was this thing called Morning Messer. You'll see Heroku does a lot of naming things. So let's have a quick look at what an app looks like on Heroku. There's a couple of things that we can do here. First of all, it sort of bases this one is all based on Git. Okay, so it uses the Git distributed versioning system to manage the code. So I can work on this as a team. Don't have to work on this by myself. You can see I've got this concept of an add-on. Okay, so not only can I configure these things, these dynos as we call them, these processes that run, I can also add things into it. These might be the data services I talk. I might want some New Relic. I might want some logging stuff. I might want some Neo4j database, perhaps. Right? There's a whole ecosystem of what we call elements or add-ons in Heroku that I can just add on, and just Heroku handles the billing. It all sort of just sits as one billing. This idea of dyno formation, you can have a couple of different dynos. You can sort of have workers and web dynos. And you see this one is a web dyno, and it started away here, happily running for me. Here's where, if I wanted to, this is kind of cool, and I'll show you some of this and confirm, upgrade. I'm going to upgrade. I get to do this because, well, I work for Salesforce and I get Heroku for free. So don't follow this one along, because then we'll start billing you for it. This is the difference between the paid tier and the free tier. So I should be able to go scale up. Might get out of there. Get out of there. When I want to deploy things, again, one of the neat things about Heroku is this idea of pipelines. So you can set up deployment pipelines in Heroku that will allow you to do things like continuous integration builds. So you can set up whenever code changes. I'm really bad with this microphone. Whenever code changes inside the Git repository, you can send it to a staging environment. Okay, and you can deploy those staging environments into production with the click of a button. From a developer experience standpoint, these things are really, really cool. You can get a lot of metrics about how your app runs. So if you need to diagnose things in production on Heroku, this is all part of this thing they call a developer experience. And you can start to see how it really takes a lot of the pain out of running applications on the web for you. You can see who's accessing it and what kind of activity is going on it, and some settings. This is where we set our production variables in here. And you'll see that I've got the client IDs, it's secrets, and we'll talk about that in a little second. My password, so this is obviously doing authentication for me. Okay, so we talked about the authentication for here. And then I've got these tokens that I get from my Slack channels when I set up. So if I come back and have a look at my integrations, again, you'll see I've got 3 / commands here. Okay. And this is what I was talking about before, is when I set my pipeline, here I get my URL about where I'm sending it to. Okay, and this, if you've set this up, you won't have morning mesa 27. You'll have some other name from Heroku that you need to set inside your slash command. This is this token as well, and this is part of how we validate this thing's coming from the right spot. And I can see in my opportunity token, this is where I put my tokens here. So the token that I set up in Slack, I come back and copy in here. The last piece of this puzzle is this thing called a connected app in Salesforce. So if I come into apps, I'm in setup here, and I come and search for the apps, and you'll see I've got all my Salesforce apps there. And now I've got this thing down the bottom here that's like connected app, okay? And a connected app, when we create a connected app, we're telling Salesforce that we want an application outside of Salesforce. We want to give it permission to use the API and use those OAuth tokens. Okay, and that's what we've done here. We've come in and we've enabled OAuth, and you can see I've, again in true demo fashion, given this a full access for scope. But if I wanted to limit this to just say the chatter feed, right, this is where I can limit my OAuth scope and give it that limited set of credentials that I was talking about. The other thing you want to watch in here is this idea of my consumer secret. So there's those two things that I pulled out and put into my Heroku app, okay, my consumer key and my consumer secret. And these things get passed to Salesforce when the authentication handle happens, okay, and it figures out that that's coming from the right spot. And the last thing, guys, you'll also, on this callback URL, you want to update that callback URL to the app that you've created on Heroku. And the reason you want to do that is because when Heroku authenticates via OAuth, the OAuth mechanism calls back on that URL if it was successful. Okay, and it sends back a payload that says, here's what I know about this user. This authentication mechanism you had was successful. And it'll call back on this URL, and then you process that in your code. So we should be able to do things now like go to pipeline. I had a contact. I should do things like my contact, and it'll list some contacts that I've been looking at. And what was my other one? I had a case. Oops. The case one was kind of interesting because it'll create a case for me. And you see I didn't put any of the properties in there. So it's created an empty case. Slack not working. Let's create a case and get back to someone and say, look, hey, Slack doesn't seem to be working as part of my demo. That's not entirely true. That's working for me. So that's where you can start to see how we'd bring functionality from Salesforce into Slack as well. Who's working through this? Who's got their Slack stuff going? Yep, I'm going to I'll give you guys some time to keep going. If you're not working through that, if you've got any questions, I don't know, we can watch YouTube videos or something, I don't know. One of the interesting things about this OAuth stuff, guys, if you've never done this kind of thing before in Salesforce, there's a bunch of stuff on the developer site around how OAuth works and what these things are called. They talk about OAuth flows. There's a number of different ways you can authenticate through the OAuth protocol. So I definitely recommend jumping on and having a read from some of the stuff that's been written out there. You can also do some things about run this connected app handler, which is kind of cool. We use this kind of stuff for if you wanted to build portals or have users log in through Facebook and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. So little known thing, I guess, you can set up Salesforce to actually just proxy off to Facebook or to Google or Office 365 we use as an identity provider. So there's a whole like an identity framework in here that you can use as well. The other neat thing about what you can do here is set up different attributes on here. So you can say in Salesforce, when I log in as a profile, I can restrict my IP address where I come from. But I can say, well, I know that there's an IP address range for the Heroku service that sits in Ireland, for example, and I want to make sure that this OAuth request is coming from that range. So for this app, I can specify a range of IP addresses that are going to be whitelisted for it. Okay? So the connected app framework inside Salesforce has sort of been evolving over the last couple of years around stuff like that. And it's definitely something it's interesting to think about. I'm personally yet to run into a situation where I'm adding custom attributes to things, but I'm not an identity guy either, so I don't really know how they work. I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to keep working through that, those that can. Anyone got any questions? Are those people that Slack wasn't working for? Is it still not working? Yeah. 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 You got to. We'll see if we can fix that. Yeah. That was quite interesting. Unexpected. Yeah? Good question. Good question. Where do you find your security token? Question for you, sir. Which user interface are you using? Salesforce, Lightning or Classic? Lightning. Good man. Come up here and click on your little smiley face and hit settings. Do you see that? Yep. Sorry. So up here, smiley face, settings. And then in here, because I'm pretty lazy, I always use the quick search. Come and find this reset my security token. That'll send a token to your email address. Okay? So you should have your email address. I won't click that button because that'll break all my integrations because it'll change my security tokens for me. Oh, that's what we're here to do. We've created second-class citizens, those that have Slack sessions and those that don't. Oh well. Like I said, guys, we're running this again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, so hopefully the Slack guys can help us with that. And we can figure something out overnight, and we can come and have another crack and see how we go. All right. I might kick on and we can talk through the last bit, and then I'm quite conscious I'm probably standing between you guys and beers. never want to be that person. So if you're working through it, we're obviously not going to kick you out, and we'll be around to help if you did manage to get a Slack session. But if you didn't, we'll talk about the rest, and then you can decide if you want to hang around and chat. So what we're going to do for the third one is pretty much the same thing we just did, but just with a few different tweaks around what we're doing. So the main difference here is we're going to set up this thing called a bot, okay? And in the lexicon, it used to be called a chatterbot, really. And the idea is that we have some kind of code that we can talk to like it's a person, okay? And we figure out how we're going to do that. It's in our Node.js application that we're deployed, it's actually this thing called BotKit. Okay, and the Slack guys apparently contributed a lot to the BotKit stuff, which I didn't know. I found that out today, so that's kind of interesting. And what that does is it does a sort of a natural language read on what you do, and you configure it to look for words, and when it finds words, you configure it to do things in Salesforce. So we've set that up to do a couple of things here. I think we're creating cases and stuff like that. We'll see what we can do. But it works exactly the same. We comment out to the bot in Slack. It forwards that on to our Heroku app. The Heroku app has been authenticated and it's holding a session for us. And it does the communication to Salesforce and back again. Again, we create a Heroku app. You'll see it's got just this bot token this time. So it's got a few different things that we can configure here inside our environment variables on Heroku. Again, another neat feature of Heroku is how it sort of abstracts that kind of stuff for you. Again, try not to take photos of my password. Oh, I think I've reset the token on this one, so that's okay. And then we come in and configure a bot in Slack. And the same thing that we did before, we came in and we added an integration into our Slack channel. We're going to do the same thing here, and this time we're going to add a bot, with a lovely little bot icon. And then we're going to add that configuration. It's going to set up how we do that. So let's go and have a quick look at what that does look like. Let's give us a little bit more room there. So if I come back to my custom integrations. So and again, guys, in case you've kind of forgotten where that is, I come into my channel settings, add apps. You'll see I have now got a bot configuration. Thank you. When I look at there's my API token that I get. Okay, so this is the token that I get. And then I get to customize what the name is that appears in Slack. I can say I wouldn't call it my force bot. I can do things like upload images and all that kind of stuff and configure it and do all that fun stuff. Okay, then you do this thing, you say, which channels is this bot going to follow? So I can do a couple of things. I can just go to the bot and talk straight to the bot, or I could @forcebot it and mention it inside channels and have it respond to me, which is kind of cool. Again, in Salesforce, if I come back to my setup, my homepage setup, and look at my apps, you'll see that I've also configured that's the wrong one, but you get the point. I've also configured my bot app as a connected app here as well. So I want to give my bot the ability to access Salesforce and authenticate and do that kind of stuff as well. Okay, so the working bits of what we've done here is pretty similar. Okay, we're going to deploy our app, our Node.js app. Again, we've got in the documentation here, I'm going to set our bots up. We've got our Heroku button again. Okay, so another nice use of the Heroku button there. We just click that button and we'll go and set that application up inside Heroku. Fairly cool. And that's pretty much it. The code for all this, guys, you can follow under, if you head out under those buttons and you'll see where it goes. It goes out to Christoph's GitHub repository. And again, there's a couple of videos there to watch, to sort of see it all in action as well, which is kind of cool. If you've not met Christoph, he's out upstairs. Have a quick look at what we can do. Like I said, we can come in here and ask questions of our ForceBot, like we can ask it for help. And our ForceBot will actually spin up on Heroku and time out for the first time, I'm imagining. No. Help me, ForceBot. What are you doing now? This is my Heroku app spinning up. Excellent. One more try. Thank you. So now it's responding back to me. My Heroku bot was out on break or something, having a cigarette or something, I don't know. And then I can start to search. So I can search account United, and it'll find that out and go and search and find things that have United in them, which is kind of cool. United Oil and Gas. And here's a bunch of different different accounts with the relevant links to get me back into Salesforce if I want to get back in there and look at those things. I can search for contacts, or I can do things like create a contact. This is quite nice, and this is where bots, I think, become really useful, because you can start to define conversations you can have with them. So I've said, hey, I'd like to create a contact. Yep, I can help. What's the first name? It's me. Okay. I'm an enterprise architect, and that's not my phone number. And away I go. And now I can go and create things like that. And these kind of interactions, the sort of the thinking behind that is it's a much more natural way for an end user to interact with a computer. Okay. And you see a lot of different bot technology. You start to see, I think, the Facebook Messenger bots are starting to be pretty interesting. Like how you can automatically respond to people in customer service situations using this kind of technology. That idea of someone calls out onto your company through Messenger, you can actually set up a bot to go and see if it can answer that for you. And it's these kind of technologies that a lot of our customers are starting to deploy into the field to try and scale things like their customer service department. Kind of useful. Probably depends on how good your bot is to be how useful that is. But I think, when you talk to people that run customer service organizations, they talk in things like 10-15% case deflection has material value in a big customer service organization. So if I'm coming in here and I'm like, how do I reset my password? I can write a regular expression that says, look for the phrase reset your password and send them to a knowledge article. How to reset my password. And those kind of things all add up in that kind of scenario. So this is where we're starting to see people talk a lot about bots and stuff as well. We see some interesting use cases around bot technology and chatter as well. I've seen some people sort of talk about how to integrate chatter with Facebook and things like that using bot technology, which is kind of fun, I guess. That's pretty much all I had. Now, the theory behind it, right, was that Slack was going to be up and you guys were going to be whacking out Slack commands for the rest of the day. But feel free to hang around. We can talk at detailed length about this or any other topic you'd like to talk about. If you were one of the lucky few that managed to get a session from Slack, feel free to hang around and we can make sure you get this finished as well. I'm feeling quite lucky that I was one of the first ones to get the Slack session, because this would have been a whole different experience even without a demo. Any questions? Cool. The code is available. Great question. Is the code available for this? It certainly is. So the first question, I shall I've hidden it quite well. see up here, and I've got this. Luckily, someone has done the heavy lifting for us inside this. So if you pop open that hyperlink, it's going to take you to the blog that Christoph wrote. This is not my code. I just wrote the tutorial. Christoph wrote all the code, and so he's got all his stuff up here on his blog as well, if you want to go. Or you can just go and find Christoph over on GitHub, and it's all publicly available there. But if you're interested about how I got to that from what I've given you today, there's this link here that says someone has done the heavy lifting for you. Follow that link and it will take you to where you need to be. And so now you guys are in the know. So if you come here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, you just know that you've got to be first onto the Slack. Just sit down and the first thing you do is log on to Slack and get your session, which is cool. Anyway, I hope to see you all at Lenny Kravitz's in a little while, and how we'll laugh about this one day. Sure can. Yeah, I'll put it up on the screen again because it's useful. Again, yeah, for everyone, if you didn't catch this link, that's where the tutorial is. If you want to run it from a different IP address, then jump on and get that. Guys, does anyone know if we're publishing slides somewhere? I don't know. Sounds like something we might do. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure we want to publish this one. That's hilarious.